On today's episode, we take a look at the past year of cringes and pick out some of our absolute favorites. This is Cringe Posts. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. This is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes you find in your feed, and we go over them, try to laugh at what they get wrong, but also laugh at ourselves because we've all made bad, dumb posts. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host, Britt. Before we get started, would love to get a like, comment, share, all that good stuff if you're enjoying the show. It means a lot to us, and it helps us out in a big way. This is our final episode before the rebrand. So we thought we would look back since the last time we sort of did a review episode. We did that at the end of last year. And since then, we've had even more posts than we did. Or episodes to go over all these bad posts. So we did sort of a similar thing where we picked out our 5 favorite posts from this past year, and we highlight them. So I get to pick my favorite cringe from Britt, and he picked his favorite cringe from me, and then we picked 5 others on other topics. So we always, of course, start by making fun of ourselves. So right here, my favorite Brit cringe from the past.
I thought this would be
year.
it.
Yeah. It was the secession post from Brit, where Brit on November 13 of 2012 posted, "Oh my, almost 4 times the needed signatures," and a link to a petition that says, "Peacefully grant the state of Texas to withdraw from the United States of America and create its own nation." It's cut off there, but that's what it would assume to be said. And then the comments show 92,000 out of nearly 26 million really isn't much, as someone commented. And Britt responds, "Agreed. It's just ridiculous that 92,000 would sign," which of course now is just you went that direction with it. But then you had to follow it up with with the best part, which is the follow-up comment where Britt writes, "Condescending Wonka meme. Oh, so Obama is unconstitutional and Americans need to take action. Secession is such a good step towards being constitutional."
Oh, no.
Man, I mean, the funny thing is, it had been a while since we had this one on the show, but I as soon as I saw it, I remembered everything that made me laugh about it too. So I feel like I'll be a broken record, but even the fact that you couldn't even make the meme on like mememaker.com,
I know.
you had to type it out, makes it even funnier to me. It's so good to see that just typed out, not the image, not it made in that Advice Animals Impact font format. No, it just typed out as a comment. So funny to me.
I know. And when I watch or when I see that and you read it back to me, like I kind of pride myself on being homeschooled, which means like I had a lot of alternative education, and a lot of the historical stuff that they would teach in public school was not taught to me. It was taught to me in a different way in being homeschooled. But one exception to that definitely is the Civil War. That propaganda is still pretty strong within the homeschooling community, in that like, oh no, it's better that we were together and all this stuff. And so that's where my view that like preserving the Union was constitutional came from, which is just ridiculous. I mean, that's literally the reason why we are, set up the way we are set up.
I think the funny thing too is I don't know that growing up I ever heard any arguments on the constitutionality of it. I remember hearing that Abraham Lincoln in his time was criticized by a lot of newspapers and had a lot of strong, fierce opponents, but it was always sort of painted as this, in the times you're living in, you can't appreciate what he's doing. But I never heard this is a constitutional thing to do type argument. And I never, of course, I don't think I really heard this was unconstitutional for them to break away, or it isn't brought up because the reality is secession is completely constitutional, which is very clear, even after you have the finalized constitution and, not the Articles of Confederation, which I think would have made it even more clear. Even after you have the Federalist influence, it's still abundantly clear that should a state want to leave the Union, they have that right. And so, and on a state level, I believe it is actually explicitly written into Texas's state constitution that they have the right to secede should they choose to.
Yep.
So for all that reasoning, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring up the constitutional argument. So it's really funny that you specifically highlight that as a critique, not some other aspects to say like, oh, yeah, I'm sure you're going to survive on your own without the, I don't know, protection of the military or without the economic trade or whatever the sort of utilitarian arguments that I think guide our discussions on the Civil War and the Union being preserved. A lot of those arguments are more, isn't it good because we have this big nation or what, or isn't it good because of the military? Isn't it good because of the trade? Whatever arguments. It's never constitutional. You kind
I
of
know,
jump
but
there on your own.
those were taught to me as hand in hand, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
the preservation of the Union and being able to have like a really strong military, and like it's better to be together than separate. The age old like we either hang together or we'll hang separately. Misapplied
Mhm.
to this instance, and so that's where that came from. And when I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like real time me being indoctrinated by what I was at. Like I didn't know any better, at that point. And I mean, we've talked about this before. I thought Lincoln was just the best, as
Yeah.
many people still do.
Yeah. Nope. I mean, and frankly, so much of the material just doesn't teach you the other side of that. So I personally don't blame, a lot of the. I mean, I guess I blame the curriculum themselves. I don't blame a lot of the people who use curriculum that teach that necessarily, because that is, like you said, one of the most pervasive things across all curriculum. Even if you are trying to sort of teach the real history of things,
Yeah.
that one gets often thrown in there. Okay, we'll move on to my cringe. So I
All
don't know
right.
which one he picked
I know
here.
you don't know. So
Uh,
I had to go through a lot because you had some really really cringy ones, man. And
yeah, I don't need to
I
remind
was
me.
like, okay, we could do the political one. I think last year we did the you were happy the guy got killed by the cops,
Yep.
and I opted for one that wasn't as political. So I've got Donald Kimball, 2009, November 19th, and you write, let's see how many people on Facebook aren't ashamed to show their love for God and admit that Jesus is their savior. ... We need to get God back in America. ... If you're not ashamed, copy and paste this in your status. ... Attach semicolon photos video event causes more. Oh man, I just like you must have been what, 15, 16 when you did this.
I would have been, yeah, I think I would have been 15.
This is
Oh my gosh.
the last line where you obviously like you copied way more than you intended to.
I
It makes it
highlighted the lower
worse.
part.
Worse than a grandparent doing this. Like that's how bad this post is.
Oh, I know. I was gonna say, I mean, the syntax of it is already pretty bad, right? Where you have all the ellipses and then the space and the capital lines, and I mean, if you're not ashamed, copy and paste this. It doesn't matter what the preceding message is. You should be ashamed if there is a line that says, "If you're not ashamed, copy and paste this."
You gave him the peer pressure.
I gave into peer pressure, and then yeah, just the attached photos. That is so funny because obviously either the reality is click and highlighted and copied someone's message, or the person whose message I copied had done the same thing, and I genuinely don't know. It's probably me. I probably just click and drag too far and highlighted the Facebook, attach a photo, video, or event or whatever. But
We were
yeah, no,
playing
oh,
last
so
night with
awful.
some friends. Have you ever played like Jackbox
Yeah,
TV? Like
totally.
so there's this game called Guesspionage, and it's
Hmm.
basically like guess how much what percentage of people answered yes or no to this question. And one of them was like what people feel comfortable putting up an overtly political or religious post on their Facebook.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought it would be a lot. Because of our experience here, I'm a little bit got tunnel vision, so I think that
Yeah.
this is representative of most of humanity. But it turned out it was only like 16%. I felt
Wow.
comfortable, which I was pretty surprised by. But you probably fell into that in 2009.
Yeah,
you you felt good
I
about
am the
leaving those things up.
16%. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, I'm sure when we get to the pearly gates, this is going to be one of my star accolades. One of the treasures stored up in heaven is you were not ashamed to
Yeah,
share that
they'll
Facebook.
open the book of life and be like, okay, check, check, check. Confess Jesus as your savior. Did he share that Facebook status? Oh, he didn't copy it exactly right. He copied too much.
I was gonna, I was gonna say, I'm worried for all the people. Oh man, right here it says on your record that you kept scrolling when it said keep scrolling if you love the devil. Like, come on, man.
Get in this keep
Um,
scrolling line.
yeah. Okay. All right. So, we're gonna move on to the external picks here. I was telling Britt that if I hadn't tried intentionally to diversify my topics on these posts, I would have gone and done 5 COVID
Yeah.
posts, because especially over the past year, where we are right now, where we see, and if we were doing an episode, maybe this shows up in the future here, but this recent Atlantic article opinion piece saying, it's time to call what is it? What's the
Amnesty.
phrase? Yeah, amnesty. Yeah, amnesty on the COVID
That's funny
stuff. The people who were completely wrong, who ruined people's lives for this, are talking about amnesty now. So of all times to go back and look at that post, and again, this isn't even from, a lot of these are from 2020, but most of them are from 2021, and seeing how dead wrong people were and how authoritarian they were about this, it took all of me to not just pick 5 COVID. So that being said, we're going to start with these COVID picks. So mine came from Bill Crystal, which is actually pretty recent. This one came from January of 2022, and this one, I guess, relatively recent. But this one reads: if tobacco companies were guilty of knowingly promoting falsehoods that led to early deaths, shouldn't Fox be liable for anti-vaccination falsehoods that have led to early deaths? Both did it for profit, and Fox suits and stars know the truth as surely as tobacco execs ever did. Do you want to go for your pick first, or do we want to talk one at a time? What's your
Let's do one
here?
at a time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I picked this one because this is the complete antithesis of the rhetoric we're seeing now about amnesty, right? About this take we've seen where it's, let's have COVID amnesty. Look, people were wrong and we need to forgive them for that. This guy was claiming that people who were against this vaccine, and I would say more broadly that, anti-mask movement, the pro freedom of association movement, whatever it is, you saying that if, you were violating this, you should be held liable for all these, for the deaths of people. So my response now is, great. So all of these companies like pharmaceuticals and the government officials that were briefed on this at the highest levels, if they were guilty of knowingly promoting falsehoods, like if you get the vaccination, you can't spread this disease, or masks that aren't N95s are effective, and things like that. If they knowing that, shouldn't they be held liable? Shouldn't that be where we go now if we're trying to hold people accountable for destruction and deaths and chaos? Well, it seems to me there is one party who was wrong about this now that we've known for the whole time, but now is even clear, and it's to the point where you can't pretend that you were right. So are we still going to do this? Because if so, then great. But somehow I don't think Bill Crystal is going to be calling for that, because he's part of the class that wanted to shut everything down.
The part that's rich to me too, and I think we talked about this when we went over the take, is Bill Crystal calling for accountability for people that knew something was a lie that led to deaths is just really rich. We consider his track record on all of our foreign interventions and all sorts of things. It's like, okay, sure. Even if we granted, like all the past year of revelations be darned, we count that and we agree with his premise. It's like, man, you are chief among those that have, through lies and deceit and propaganda, have caused deaths of innocent people. You probably want to be careful about what standard you're setting, because it's going to apply to you way more than it applies to the Fox suits and stars.
Yeah, the thing too about this is, in his premise, he's saying, oh, we know that this anti-vaccination stuff is causing deaths, but that's not actually true, right? To say that there are some studies which show an increased resilience, well, it's also not absolute. Even at this time, we knew that you can get COVID, you can die if you have the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
And so at best, the measure he is saying that people need to take is preventative, but there was still cause destruction, or as a byproduct of what naturally will happen. The actions that we want held accountable for are the direct actions that are directly causing harm. The shutting down of businesses directly starved people of business and money and their livelihoods. It directly disrupted the supply chain lines, causing food to increase. It directly affected the mental health of teenagers who committed suicide. So all of the things we want to hold people accountable for are the actual actions that are the causing effect of the bad things. Even if you accept his premise, he's trying to hold people guilty of an action that is, or of a result that is the byproduct of inaction, not the cause of it. It's totally messed up. How his standard is so low for what you're guilty of if it's for the thing that he's promoting, and how so high if it's for the thing that that he himself promoted.
All right, so mine's a little bit on the same sort of page. So
Oh, that was in my original 5. Yep, yep,
so it's
yep.
Michael Hiltzik. We're gonna do one on journalists here, and I debated about whether I should put this there or not. I decided it should go here
Yep.
because of that Atlantic article about granting amnesty, and the type of people that they want to grant amnesty towards is that, like this guy named Michael Hiltzik, and he writes a column and it's titled "Mocking Anti-Vaxxers' Deaths is Ghoulish, Yes, but Necessary," and he writes for the L.A. Times, and so you know especially with everything that's gone with like Paul Pelosi as of late. These same people, they're like, "Oh, it's time for a serious look in the mirror." When Paul Pelosi got hit in the head by a hammer by someone invading it, they're also the same people that wanted to mock anyone that died during COVID that wasn't vaxxed, and they justified it, and they put some sort of righteous indignation next to their names, to justify their actions and everything. These people, it did not really the COVID did not really discriminate between vaccinated or unvaccinated in terms of who caught it. In terms of deaths, the leading indicator of whether you were at risk of death or not was not whether you were vaccinated or not vaccinated. It was whether you were old or had comorbidities or anything like that. So people that died that weren't vaxxed most likely also had comorbidities or were a lot older. So this guy, for all of his talks about like you need to protect grandma and stuff, also felt perfectly fine mocking grandma when she died and didn't have the vaccine. And so I think this is just one of the more awful and ugly takes that we saw. It's actually, if you want to make comparisons to fascist dictatorships that begin with Nazi in them, this is more like that than any of the other takes that I've seen from any side in terms of depersoning, unpersoning people and comparing them and their deaths to animals or anything like that. This guy kind of crowns that, and that's why it made my top COVID take for the year.
Yeah. I think it's crazy how people love to entirely blame one side for the mockings and the ridicule, and it's like, look, I think there are a lot of people in this life who identify politically right, who identify politically left or independent, who are going to say disgusting, heinous, gross things, who are going to cheer on violence because that's kind of a base human nature when it is not bettered by a moral foundation, right? You cheer for your enemy's destruction even when they're not your enemy, kind of a thing. You want the horrible thing for someone who you disagree with, whether or not they are a villain or not. But there is this incredible double standard where, generally speaking, the political left gets this moral high ground where they talk about the violent rhetoric. And the reason they get to talk about this violent rhetoric is because they get to define what violence is in these things like universities and the broader culture that is controlled by the left. You have idiots saying things like violence, property destruction isn't violence, and that saying things like misgendering someone is violence, right? So they get to control the narrative on what violence is or isn't. And so they get to promote this idea that they propagate to people that, oh, the right is full of this violent rhetoric, and that's why you have people coming out and attacking Paul Pelosi. And again, that particular case is very strange and odd.
It is.
But let's, for the sake of this argument, assume that it is a right winger who is inspired by his political beliefs to attack Paul Pelosi or Nancy Pelosi or whatever. Sure, okay, assume. I didn't see a single thought leader on the right saying good on him. Were there trolls and were there little people saying it? Sure, yeah. But when Rand Paul was attacked by his neighbor, you had Nancy Pelosi's daughter saying his neighbor was right. And you had all the top prominent officials, not all, but a lot of top prominent left-wing people saying, wow, his neighbor was a hero, or his neighbor 2024, or whatever it was. So, and this is an example of that, where they define what violence is. Violence is words. It's not property destruction, but it's also not words when you're mocking the deaths or calling for aggressive action against their political dissidents of their views. And that is the most disgusting thing here, is that this kind of speech is totally excused, but they will be up in arms when a Dave Chappelle special comes out where he's clearly joking.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that one. And I think that, I like the double standard is utterly apparent when I can't remember what state this was in, but some state representative that was very pro-vaccine basically propagated the winter of death line that the Biden administration was saying about the unvaccinated, actually passed away due to heart complications. Most likely, now that we know, 25,000 in a million instances of myocarditis for folks that are vaxxed, most likely died because of that. When he died, someone posted it. I think it was like Jack Posobiec or someone posted an article, said, "Hey, this is kind of weird," and kind of ironic. And everyone, all the left jumped on him, saying he was unkind, stop politicizing someone's death. It's like, man, like this, the same side right here is not only politicizing deaths, but also reveling in it and being excited about it and justifying their joy. So I think that kind of gives the game away. This was all about power. It was all about getting Trump out of office. It was all about pursuing their agenda. It was not actually about caring about grandma.
Totally agree. Okay, we're moving on to our journalists topic here. So journalists, I have the two tweets. One is a good tweet. One is from a New York Times writer who writes, Matthew Rosenberg, who writes, "Joe Rogan is what he is. We in the media might want to spend more time thinking about why so many people trust him instead of us." Good based take from a journalist. Rare to see. And then Ida Bay Wells, is her tag, but I believe it's Nicole Hannah Jones, I believe is her actual name, responds saying, "With respect, I don't get this. We need to understand why millions of Americans don't mind the open racism. It's not a mystery. Been reporting on it for years. So what do we do with that?" And I love this because it is just the most clear just demonstration of how blind journalists and people who can't understand, I would say, the average real person in America, the average apolitical, I'm just going about watching UFC fights or I'm listening to podcasts or whatever it is, how they operate. They're not listening to Joe Rogan thinking, wow, he made, a somewhat insensitive racial joke like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. This guy's got to be teeming with racism. He has to be hateful to his other human being, and I'm for it. I'm listening to this and I'm tolerating and accepting it. In fact, frankly, a lot of people who listen to Joe Rogan, they didn't even know that existed. And the point is that he doesn't inhabit those characteristics or that persona they want to put onto him because he made, an insensitive racial joke at one point. If you're listening to the content of someone and they're not spewing racism, a joke 15 years ago is not this dog whistle where all of their work up to, after that point is secretly matrixing people's minds into becoming racist when he says another thing, and they're all going to wake up and be like, wow, we're all white supremacists now because we've been listening to this content for years, and secretly we've been turned into racists by him. It's just a stupid concept, and she's just so circular where, again, critical race theory, this ideology teaches that it's not, is there racism? It's where is the racism in any given situation.
Yep. Yeah. He could have literally appended his tweet and said Exhibit A, and then in parentheses, Nicole Hannah Jones will provide an example of what I'm saying, because they don't understand that, like, majority of middle America, folks that are working class, people in the Rust Belt, stuff like that, like, those people have it hard, man. Like, people in Appalachia, they've had a hard time of it. They had a hard time under Obama. And one of our mutual friends, I remember telling me in 2014 and 2015, he said, "Hey, I think that middle America is going to overwhelmingly vote for a Republican. There's going to be a really big backswing because all of these journalists, all of these elites, all of these different folks have been talking down to them, but they're not doing good. And these people that are talking down to them are doing really, really, really well, really rich, Nicole Hannah Jones among them. And it's going to, regardless of who it is, they're going to vote because they simply just do not like and cannot stand that." And the journalists and the elite class have still not learned their lesson, right? After Trump won, totally shocked them all. It's not that Trump was necessarily representative of the everyday man, but Trump represented the middle finger to these folks. And so does, Joe Rogan maybe is a little more representative of the everyday man. Obviously, his lifestyle and where he's at in the wealth strata is not the same, but he represents not conforming to what the elites want to say or towing the company line, thinks for himself, and has connections to working hard and physicality and things like that. And so the journalists, case in point, don't get it. They just say, "Oh, well, if they don't do what we like, we're just going to call it racist." And it's like, well, no, we actually have some actual complaints, some actual points, and some actual grievances. Why don't you address those instead of just saying that we're racist because we don't want to have And I think about McKinney, Texas, 100,000 people there, 11,000 folks streaming over the border into that town every week. It's like that's a legit complaint. And then you see 50 people going to Martha's Vineyard, and they are like, "Oh, we can't handle all these people." It's like that is why that dichotomy of lifestyles and impact of policies and people's reactions to it, and then the what they're inferring from their reactions is what is going on in middle America and to the normal person that Nicole Hannah Jones wants to call racist.
Yeah. Last thing I'll add is just it is just striking how his whole point is Joe Rogan exists. He is whatever. Don't even
Yep.
think about him. We just need to be introspective and listen. And the first response is, I already know the answer. That's what she's saying.
Yep.
We already know people are racist, and that's why he listened to him. It's like, no, stop, breathe, be willing to listen and learn. Something that I think she could use a healthy dose of.
Yep. All right.
Oh.
My pick. So this is by Samantha Putterman. She wrote an article in PolitiFact, and the title of it is "No, Gun Control Regulation in Nazi Germany Did Not Help Advance the Holocaust." And to this, we went into really in depth when we talked about all like the actual regulations that Germany put into place and everything. But the first aspect of it is like, do you think that the Jews would have been better off or worse off if they had guns when when they figured out, oh, they're coming and taking us? I think they probably would have been better off. So the premise of this, just on its face, shows me, the lengths that that the journalist class goes to, perpetuate the narrative that the political elite class wants to perpetuate.
I love this one because there was another one I almost thought about using, which was the George Takei. Gee, wouldn't all these firearms in the U.S. help out the Ukrainians right now? And it's funny because, like you said with that question, would the Jews have been better off with armed or unarmed? And you can flip. You don't even have to talk about hypotheticals. You can say, okay, are the Ukrainians better armed or unarmed as the everyday citizen against Russia? Just ask them that, because they love supporting Ukraine. They love the idea of Ukraine defying Russia, but you need guns to do it. And I think even the journalists probably would recognize that the every man in Ukraine, whether they're part of the official Ukrainian army or not, should probably have a gun for self-defense in an invading army. And so then it's a different situation. It's an invading army, but it's like, what is Nazi Germany to its Jewish population but an invading army? It doesn't matter if the nationality is the same. These are arbitrary distinctions of legality that no one cares about when it comes down to it. Is this an outside force that is intentionally aggressing upon me and my family? If your answer is yes, you should be able to be armed and have a gun. And if you don't have a way to defend yourself, then yes, you're going to be helping the aggressing party dominate control of whether it's, again, your neighboring country or your own country.
I guess maybe you could ask, the Jews allowed to keep guns in Nazi Germany? The answer is no.
Yeah.
and why were they not allowed to keep guns? Because it would have made it harder to perpetuate the Holocaust.
Exactly.
So it answers the question itself.
Yes. Okay. All right, we'll move on. I've got one here on cops, and this one comes from the Ontario Provincial Police Highway Safety Division. They post, true story last night. 911. 911, what is your emergency? Caller. Can you help me? I am driving, but I'm too drunk to drive. Can you come pick me and take me home? 911. An officer will be right there. A 27-year-old driver is now charged with hashtag impaired driving. She was also issued an automatic hashtag 90-day license suspension and hashtag 7-day vehicle impound. Holy cow. This is the example of an individual who recognizes that they are in a dangerous situation, that they made a an early miscalculation and a lack or a poor judgment, and is calling for help. And their response is not only to arrest, charge, impound the car, but also to celebrate it in a Facebook post like, ha ha ha, aren't you so stupid? Or isn't this so funny? I mean, aside from everything else that's wrong with it, posting this is now to say, hey, if you were ever driving tipsy and you realize that you're a little too tipsy, don't call the police. Just stick it out, man. Just get all the way home. Don't call us because you'll face consequences or penalty. What an absurd thing to post. If they'd forgiven her and say, hey, you know what, we want it, we could have charged her with this, but because she caught it, we reduced her sentence to that, or we only did this. Like, even if they painted it in the light of saying, look, she did the right thing by calling us without losing the consequences, that would have been way better to say, look, even if you feel like you're in this situation, the penalty's not going to be as bad if you turn yourself in. That would have been a much better posturing, but they don't do that. They posture in this mocking, we're in control and look at this idiot kind of way. So that, I mean, that just is incredulous to me. Incredible to me. I'm incredulous at it because it's so tone deaf.
Oh, cool. Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
Oh,
yeah, the thing that's funny about this is, people talk about 911 and they say things like, oh, like call 911 in case of an emergency or if you need help or anything like that. It's like this post illustrates that is not actually what they're trying to do. They're actually trying to entrap you. They're actually trying to enforce their will upon you. They are not in existence to keep you safe. They're not in existence to make your community more safe. They're in existence to enforce the laws that your social betters put upon you. Because if they actually were there to make you more safe, they would have realized the very obvious unintended consequences that result by saying like, hey, if you call 911 because you're in an unsafe position, but because you did something illegal, we're still going to arrest you. You're going to get just as much penalty. And oh, by the way, we're also going to post about it for all the world to see and rejoice in it. So it's just really, what I like about it is that it illustrates and it makes it clear to the normal person, like, oh yeah, these guys don't care about you. They only care about upholding the law that has been forced down upon us.
Yeah, I think the ideal society of laws that I would think that someone who's a very law and order person would want is that your laws are enforced and strict enough that it's a preventative so that you don't have people breaking the crime, but also lenient enough so that when someone breaks a crime but turns them, there's still enough incentive for them to turn themselves in, while they're breaking the crime. Because the end result shouldn't be, a lawful society. The end result should be the prevention of the bad thing from happening. Hypothetically, in a quote unquote just society, a law is made to prevent a bad outcome, right? And so you should be more willing to accept people who are turning themselves in if that's preventing the bad outcome. It doesn't matter if they're not getting the full punishment of the law. The point is that the harm that was committed has been reduced by a great amount. It's like if she drove halfway home and she turns herself in, you've created the incentive to stop 50% of a crime that would have otherwise been 100% of that bad outcome, right? But now they care more about enforcing the law than they do about actually preventing the bad outcome, which the law is designed to prevent.
They're literally saying, don't be like this person.
Yes.
If you're drunk and you need help, you sure as heck better not call the cops.
Right. Exactly. So it's like, so now you've just said, okay, great, we're going to double down on enforcing the law instead of doubling down on reducing the bad outcome. Which again, if laws are just, that should be what they are aiming to do, which is to create a better society and reduce bad outcomes.
Yeah. All right. So for mine, I didn't have many cop ones that I thought were good, but I had one that was more COVID authority.
COVID cop.
Yeah, COVID cop-ish. So this person.
Yeah. This is a COVID cop.
COVID cop or an epidemiologist, take your pick. So she posts a picture of herself with a shirt on. It says, "Trust me, I'm an epidemiologist." She's got 2 masks on. And this was right after they lifted the mask mandate on for the federal airlines and everything. And she wrote, "In defiance of the mask mandate removable, I am double masked and bringing some sass to the airport this morning." And I just thought, man, like, trust me, I'm an epidemiologist. So don't trust the other epidemiologists. Like, I don't even really believe in the CDC or anything that they recommended, but this person did. And they used that as a shield to enforce their will upon me. And then once the CDC, that I don't really respect, lifted those restrictions, she still wants to, for me to trust her. It's almost as if it's like it never had anything to do with actually making things better. It only had to do with low status people having control over other people. I remember my dad was going in for surgery for some stuff, and I remember the hospitals had this crazy mandate that you can't have more than one person with them when they go in for surgery. And so, me and my mom wanted to go in, and we got an exception by like the head nurse, whatever person at the hospital. It's like, my dad might die in this surgery, so my mom and I made an exception for two people. So we're walking in, we've got an exception letter thing, and the security guy, who has like the I'm vax badge and all these paraphernalia about the COVID vaccination on him, stops us and says, "Oh no, you can't have two people in there." I'm like, "No, we have a letter." He's like, "Oh, I don't really believe you. They're not making any exceptions." And then I pulled it out and showed it to him. He's like, "I don't know. This doesn't look real. You're gonna have to call someone." I said, "Go ahead, call him right now." And he did, and then he got handed his own, and we got to go in. But it's like this. I told my mom, I was like, "Look, that guy back there, low status security guard, has no other point of authority in his entire life, because of certain laws, probably can't even like stop a person from stealing things from the hospital. But he has been given this, socially and from the government, this ability to stop and frisk people whenever he wants to when they're coming into the hospital and demand that they go here or there." And now he's decided, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it when someone is facing life or death in a surgery. And it's like that type of power transforms people into awful people, and it reveals their intentions and who they are at their core. And that's what I love about this post is this person who's an epidemiologist that we're supposed to trust as unbiased and someone that only looks at the facts and is going to give it to us straight. When her own logic for why she was recommending certain things over the past year crumbled, she still recommended it, the position that gives her the most power and gives her the most like virtue and gives her the ability to be sassy in the airport. It really just shows like how much we should not trust these people, especially when they are recommending stuff for people other than themselves.
Well, before I make any more comments on this, the first thing I just want to point out, if you're not listening, one of the best parts about this is in the image she posts of herself, she's wearing two masks, but one is one of the very thin masks they end up using for like doctors' offices for some reason that aren't N95s, and the other one's a cloth mask. So literally the two least effective versions of the masks, neither are N95s, which are the ones that actually prove to have a minimal but some level of effectiveness. And so that cracks me up. Before I make any other comment there, just point out two masks that are the least scientific ones. And yeah, the funny thing about this arbitrary ruling and regulation too is my friend is a counselor, and in Washington state, any medical facility is still required to have masks. Now, I don't know if that's still the case, because actually
it is.
Yes. Well, see, yesterday was day 975 of emergency orders, and the last day. So we're no longer under the emergency authority. I don't know if that was a ruling that was put in place by emergency authority or if it was something he maintained outside of that. There were a lot. Anyway, Inslee's terrible and power.
I was just there, like I was at a medical facility like 5 days ago, and they still had it. But that makes sense if it was yesterday.
Yeah, I was gonna say that that's a possibility. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's technically possible. But anyway, so any sort of medical facility has to, you still have to wear a mask in there. And what's super funny is this extends, in the rational, scientific, only based on data and empirical, trust me, I'm an epidemiologist type reasoning. This extends to my friend's place of work, and he again is a child counselor, like for school kids. So he's not doing anything that's involving germs, nothing involving sick kids. He's just counseling them. But in the lobby, they have to wear masks because technically counseling is a form of medical care.
Yeah.
And so, when they get into his actual room, like his office, he can tell them to take it off or whatever, because it's his area and he can make them feel comfortable or whatever. But it's just so funny because this same kind of haughty authority of like, look, we pay attention to the rules are what matter. I'm an epidemiologist, I'm going to follow what they told us. And then not only do they break the very rules that are being set up, the rules themselves are shown to be absurd from the beginning. And it's absurdity in one direction always. There's never like this bizarre exception to say, oh, you don't have to wear a mask in the grocery store randomly, where if they were being consistent with their rules, that would make no sense. The rule application never goes in that way. It only ever goes in the ridiculous way, one direction, which is to say, oh, you have to wear it if it's in a counseling or whatever. So it's like you and I, well, not you and I, this person and I disagree with the rules at times, right? But when I disagree with the rulings, it's because they don't make any sense. When this person disagrees with the ruling, it's because they've been brainwashed into this ideology that the people that are setting the rules gave them to begin with. They're not thinking on their own. They just became this machine that said, if the CDC says it's true, it has to be true. And they got that so much in their head that instead of following the CDC, they followed those initial guidelines and tried to enact their will on everyone else, whether or not it made sense. So that when
Isn't
the CDC
it wild?
admits it, that it
There's
didn't
so
make
many
sense there.
there's so many people still wearing masks. Like you go out, I mean, we live in Seattle area, so like it's kind of to be expected, but it's pretty amazing. I go out in Seattle or in Bellevue and walk around. It's like people will be just walking by themselves on the sidewalk and wearing a cloth mask or a bandana, which we have known for 3 years now does not work. So it's really psychologically interesting what has happened to people, this woman included.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, being down in Tacoma area, it's not as common. Fortunately, I've seen a lot less of it since leaving King County. So
Yeah.
that's
Same.
a good thing.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to our culture picks here. My culture picks, and this is one I actually read on an episode you weren't on.
Okay. All right.
So this one is technically fresh for you. So this content creator named I think he goes by Pokeyame. He tweets out, the DS download era of multiplayer games was undefeated. If one of the homies had Mario Kart, all the boys were eating. So to break that down for those of you who don't understand what that means, the Nintendo DS was a handheld video game console, and it had a feature where if one person owned a multiplayer game, they could play that game with other people who had DSs, even if they didn't have the game. So only one person had to have a copy of Mario Kart, and everyone could bring their DS, and you could play up, 8 friends all together in a room. You could all play together. So you had to be in the same room, but you could play the same games with people all together with your friends. It was awesome. I did it a ton with my friends. It was fantastic. So he's just saying, this was amazing, and the fact that you could do that was fantastic. And this individual responds, why does everyone keep acting like having friends was the default life experience? It effing wasn't. It still isn't. Stop aching like there was this kind of crap as a default in most kids' lives, because it's getting old and it's and heavily harmful. I'm like, this is like the biggest cry for help ever.
I know.
Having friends is not normal. And it's like, look, I'm not saying that if you didn't grow up having friends, or if you don't have friends now, that's okay. I'm not saying that, every single person in the world has had friends, but that is the normal thing. Humans relate to one another. They have social experiences and exchanges, and you bond with people. And generally speaking, if you're a nice person, you will at least have good relations with people. So I think the cherry on top for me is saying it's heavily harmful. You're telling me it is heavily harmful to tell people that having friends is a normal, good, healthy childhood experience? Wild.
You're right. It's a big cry for help. I feel really sad for that person.
Yeah.
Imagine, just replace this with anything. Like, I beat cancer. Like, why does everyone act like beating cancer is the default life experience? We know it's not, but it's amazing to celebrate it. It isn't. It still isn't. Stop acting like this is default. It's like, man, just like be happy for someone. Like, maybe you don't have friends, but this person obviously did. I do think that, when you and I were growing up during this age, especially with the DS stuff and all that, I remember that. I played Mario Kart. I played Animal Crossing, with my friends. It was awesome. And I had friends and stuff. And it's actually really harmful to pretend that that's not normal, because then exactly. it perpetuates the stigma that, like, oh, you don't need to have friends or whatever. So that's I guess that's that old cliche, hurt people hurt people. This person would love for other people to feel lonely just as much as they feel.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing because this is a pretty shallow one, but I do want to take it is that it's not even this person saying like, "Man, I wish I had that growing up." We should be considerate of those who don't have this kind of thing. It's this person is lashing out in a vitriolic way. It's not a matter of them just saying, "Hey, not everyone had that. We should be considerate." It's them saying, "You are actively harming people by saying you had a good time or whatever." So, um, yeah, it kind of reminds me of another post I almost picked, talking about celebrating a marriage or whatever. But
Oh yes, yep, yeah. That
yeah,
people don't like that.
yeah.
All right, the one that I chose is this one. It's by I don't know what her name is, but L. Silvertongue is not Daredevil, and she posted a picture of DJ, a character that is pretty forgettable from the even more forgettable The Last Jedi, a Star Wars film. And she goes, "So I know I go on about how brilliant The Last Jedi is, but Ryan Johnson deserves props for distilling into one character how dudes who are like, quote, both sides are the same, actually, and free thinkers always end up siding with fascism because it's easier. Look at Elon and look at Joe Rogan." And I don't know if I got into this in the last time we went through it, but what really struck me is that the original Star Wars was very much like the main theme was there are differences between the good guys and the bad guys. And you become a bad guy if you use the same tactics that the bad guys are using to accomplish your theory of good. You look at in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine says, "Oh, the Jedi and the Sith are not that much different, even though they clearly are." He's trying to make that point. You see Luke Skywalker struggle with, "Oh, am I going to use the dark side to accomplish the goals that I think are good to save my friends?" And he realizes, "No, I'm not actually going to use the bad side to or the wrong thing to accomplish the thing that I think is good." And so this person and this movie and Ryan Johnson ignore the overarching plots of Star Wars. And they totally ruin it in favor of pushing some political ideology. I don't think Ryan Johnson was actually thinking that when he wrote this, because I don't think he's that good of a writer or that awesome of a story crafter in that way, especially with Star Wars. But even if you grant this person's premise that it's like this does not apply either, and it's not a good point to make. It is not representative of Star Wars, and The Last Jedi is a horrible and awful movie that has almost basically ruined the entire Star Wars franchise. There's a little bit of redemption. I don't know. Have you watched Andor yet?
I have not. I haven't. I know it's good. I've heard it's good,
Oh, it's
so
so
I will. I'll
good. It's
have
so
to.
good.
But
It's so there's
yeah,
one line in it. It's not spoiling much, but there's one line where they're talking about something the Empire did that was evil, really bad. They're basically like increasing how much they're going to lock people up. And someone says in it to the person, they say, "Well, like if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear." And the one of the main characters says, "Well, no, I fear your definition of what is wrong." And that's like, wow, that's so powerful and so good. So there's some really
yeah.
good dialogue in it, and it might redeem a bit of the Disney era Star Wars.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think even I said this when we even found this post initially. I totally forgotten that character existed in that
Yeah,
movie.
he's forgettable.
He was totally forgettable. He was inconsequential and just a poorly written excuse of a character. I think that this person 100% is extrapolating what they wanted to see out of it, not what actually exists. Which I think is a very common trait with people culturally on the left, who they love to read into or make up their own stories about characters and works of fiction or things in history sometimes too. Um, but yeah, I don't understand, why this person attributes that other than this. I mean, the guy kind of betrays them, but like I don't even know if there's enough depth to this character to make a reasoned argument about his origin or meaning or anything like that. So if that's what this person wants to read into, that's fine, I guess, whatever. But it's just so funny to think that Elon Musk and Joe Rogan are siding with fascism. I kind of
Or
doubt
not
that this.
picking a side. Like they
Yeah,
picked a
yeah,
side.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, right. I was gonna say, Elon and Joe Rogan are, you know, at best, um, I mean, I are I not at best, I guess, but to parallel what this person's saying, to give them the most credit, they're not actively defying um No, they are actively defying the culture in many ways. I don't know how to give this person the credit. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
it's because they're successful, and if you're a capitalist, that means that you're a fascist because you are able to build capital and wealth or something like that. I don't know. This person's kind of backwards. I don't. I'm trying to give them the
They like
most.
The Last Jedi, so what can you expect?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. There's not much there. Okay. Um, my last pick here, I was econ slash COVID. This one is a picture of some empty shelves at a grocery store, and the post reads, "The formula shortage is an example of how free market capitalism does exactly what right wing fearmongers think socialism will do." And this one's great because uh, actually, the entire formula shortage was not caused by those the right winger free market capitalists, but it was literally caused by the socialist and lockdown policies and government regulators, all these different forces coming together to stop the supply chain, to stop the manufacturers and limiting how much could be made and how many places could be built. It was the exact demonstration of a controlled economy,
Yeah.
not the complete antithesis of what a free market society leads to, which is, hey, we can make formula. Let's make it. Oh, there's a shortage. Great. Let's produce more and sell it at higher volumes. Allow price gouging so that people who really need it will get it. All of these things were not allowed. You weren't allowed to buy more than X amount. Price gouging wasn't allowed. So again, supply chain issues because of businesses and COVID regulations being shut down. All these kinds of things led to the controlled economy that reduced the output. And yet people just say, "Oh, it's capitalism," because we quote unquote live in a capitalist society, even though it's a much much more controlled economy than they want to admit.
Yeah, I people don't realize there's like three. The reason there's a baby shortage is that there's three suppliers of it, and the one that holds like 66% of the market share had their factory like test positive for some bacteria or something like that, so they shut down. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, why are there only three baby formula makers? Like, shouldn't there be a lot? Like, if we live in a capitalist society, free market enterprise, people able to create stuff that people need, and people are having babies, so you need to create it. It's like, oh, the baby formula makers lobby the government, put a bunch of regulation on it, make it so that there can only ever be about three suppliers of the various different products. And then they also limit what we can import from other countries, from Europe or from Canada, so that they have a monopoly on the market. And they have a monopoly on the market not because they've actually won that monopoly and they keep prices low enough that no other people want to enter the market. They have artificially forced out players and forced out foreign investment and foreign products. And so what's really funny, and to prove this point, is that to solve the baby formula shortage, Biden eliminated a lot of these restrictions so people could start producing it. Other companies that previously weren't able to produce it were able to produce it. And we could ship in baby formula from other countries that pass their standards. So it's just funny that why do we have those restrictions in the first place? Wouldn't we want to lift all those? If this is so important for us to not have a baby formula shortage, why is the solution the opposite of what you were doing that led to the baby formula shortage? So
Well,
yeah, we
not to
don't live.
mention just the opposite of socialist economies in
Yeah,
general.
yeah. Capitalism was the solution to the baby formula shortage.
Exactly.
They legalized it. They
Yeah.
legalized freedom, but
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Think about the default state of trade and of production. The default state is, I'm over here on my island and I've gathered, wait for it, coconuts. And Brit's over there on his
I have to do
island
it.
and he's gathered bananas, and we trade them because I want bananas and don't have them, and he wants coconuts and doesn't have them. That's the basic. There's no rule that's put in place. There's no law. There's no regulation. That is the default state of things. So when you roll back regulations, when you again legalize freedom, like you said, that you're reverting to capitalism. You're using capitalism as the cure for the problem. So when the baby formula shortage, was being fixed, the cure was capitalism, not socialism. It makes no sense to say capitalism solved this and we're going to capitalism caused this problem and we're going to solve it by rolling back regulations. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, it does not. All right, Our last one, my last one on COVID and econ, it's a series of ones. So I couldn't believe I thought you might have a Robert Reich one in there. So I'm glad I got this one because he hadn't made it yet.
He was. I was gonna say he was on multiple, and then I ended up eliminating them because again I picked out way more than I ended up using.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so Robert Reich, there's 4 tweets here, and he tweets out a list of the minimum wage staying at $7.25, the federal minimum wage until 2022. And he writes, if wages had kept pace with productivity gains since 1968, the minimum wage would be $24 an hour. And then Bob Murphy, based economist, someone we're big fans of, tweets back, are you suggesting that there are lots of workers right now who produce $24 an hour for the employer, but only get paid minimum wage? Don't you have any connections with employers to point out the huge opportunity? It's a fantastic reply. And then the main cringe, Robert Reich's is cringe, but the main cringe comes from this fella. And he writes, a Big Mac meal costs $11.49 in Canadian. This means that the average McDonald's worker needs to sell 3 Big Mac meals per hour to be worth $30 an hour. Currently, minimum wage here is $15.65. That's 1.36 Big Macs per hour. Now, I've never worked at a McDonald's, but let's say there's 10 people on shift. Let's say it's 24-hour location. That's $3,765 a day or 326 Big Macs. I'm fairly sure that's doable, especially since that revenue is split across hundreds of other items and combos. So in short, yes, $24 an hour per hour is a viable minimum wage. Just sell a couple extra Big Macs. Hashtag eat the rich. Now, what the fallacy that we pointed out, and I think that this is a take that a lot of people will fall for because it's like, oh, like back of the napkin math, someone comes up with some epiphany that millions of people, literally millions of people that work in the fast food industry have not been able to figure out because they're not able to hire more people. So I'm sure if they could figure out, oh, we just need to sell a few more Big Macs and we could pay people a lot of money and incentivize them to work here, they would have done it. That person that sells the Big Mac that works at the McDonald's store, how much of that Big Mac do you think they produced? They produced almost none of it. All they did was they took the meat that had been produced, the bun that had been produced, and the condiments, put them together, and then handed them to someone and took some money in exchange for that. That's like maybe the last 1% of that Big Mac being produced. There's a whole other supply chain. There's a whole other sourcing. There's production of the actual meat itself, of the bread, the maintenance of the store, the overhead for all the administration and accounting and business software, the people that manufacture the terminals and the cooking machines. All of that is part of the cost of that Big Mac. And that's why a Big Mac costs what it costs. And that's why you can't pay someone $24 an hour because they only contributed maybe 10 cents of value to that Big Mac when it came out of the assembly line. And so these socialists will do this, they think they're what is it? Michael Mouse calls a midwit because they're somewhat smart. They can do math. They can do math, and so they can read. So they see that, oh, sign says a Big Mac costs, what do you say? Big Mac costs $15 or whatever it is in Canada.
11, yeah,
11.50. Yeah, a Big Mac meal costs $11.50 in Canada, and divide that by how much a person needs to have a livable wage, and we're there. It's like that's not how it works. And you think you're so smart, but you're not. And you got it wrong. You did not account for everything. And if something can be as complicated as labor pricing, you think can be distilled into 3 tweets and solved, chances are you don't have it right.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just love this assumption. I mean, you went over it already, but I do love the assumption that it's like if you sell the Big Mac, if you sell 3 Big Macs, you are worth $30 an hour. That is a crazy assumption because, I mean, even if you assumed all of the other costs, you also recognize that humans or not humans, that the decay that happens in the building itself is a cost that has to be realized, right? You sell a Big Mac not just for all of the costs that it takes to make that Big Mac, but you have to sell it for more, and you have to sell things for enough over the price point in order to accommodate for all of the other things that you don't get profit on, right? So you don't get a profit when someone comes down and sits down on your bench, but enough people sitting down on that bench or enough people eating on that table, and you're going to have to replace the table or the bench because they get worn down. Enough people come in, you have to keep the heating and the electricity on in that building. You don't charge people for that directly. Oh, would you like to sit in our heated room over here, or would you like to sit in our outdoor venue that's not at all, has, it's a slab of concrete, and you sit outside or whatever. Like, you don't charge extra for those things, and so you have to make up the cost. So even if you assumed everything else about this guy's take was right, you'd have to make some major calculations to figure out what kind of overhead is factored into the profits on a Big Mac. So I'm genuinely curious as to what the average cost of all that would be, because that would also get into his math, and this just absolutely absurd tweet storm that he has. And the other funny thing about it too is he doesn't respond at all to to the actual claim that's being made about what people are worth in terms of how much value they're creating. He's just talking about selling a product at a certain point, but he's also acting as though a McDonald's employee is bringing in that revenue like a salesman is. And that's also the funny thing too, is that the Big Mac seller is just facilitating that exchange. They're not going out and making that sale. It's not like you hire 10 people and they're going to sell 3 Big Macs an hour each. It's like McDonald's is going to sell what it's going to sell because of other marketing campaigns, which are other costs, which are other expenses. They're just facilitating that transaction. I mean, not to reduce humans to machines, because they're definitely not. And there's, human interaction and customer service or whatever. But functionally speaking, the human in that position is just another machine that's helping the production of Big Mac sale, in the same way that the fryer, is creating heat. He's creating the social grease to slide the exchange through. He's just another part of that transaction. He's not actually going out and getting the customers. So to say that you're hiring someone and then his last little line, just sell more Big Macs, that's another cost. That's not a cost that these employees don't contribute to either, unless you create some sort of ingenious and never done before, sales campaign for fast food, where you have people actively going out vying for sales on a fast food meal.
Yeah, for young people that are just entering the workforce, and maybe in the professional setting or anything like that, what I've told interns that I've had, or people that I've mentored, is that a good question to ask yourself, every single day when you're at work, is calculate out your yearly salary, divide it by 365 or whatever metric you need to distill it down to a day's worth of salary. If you're making $50K a year, you're probably taking away $150 a day. Is the effort that you just did today, is the value that you brought worth at least double that $150 that your employer is paying you? Because if it's not worth double, then you are a drain on the system. You are not actually contributing. You're taking it away, and you're probably not going to have a job for much longer. That's why salespeople a lot of times are the last folks to go in an organization, because you can directly measure that, hey, Jim or John brings in, we pay them $80,000 a year, but they bring in and generate $500,000 a year if we didn't have them. That's very easy to say, oh man, we can't cut them, because that's going to actually affect our bottom line. Where someone that's in HR that can't actually assign any sort of value to their work, or it's much harder to at least assign a direct dollar value to their work, is going to have a harder time, and they usually get let go first. I'm not dismissing anyone that works in HR or anything like that. I'm just saying that concept proves true across all business functions, and so you should always be working to provide enough effort and value that you're at least worth double what people are paying you, because it's not a worthwhile investment if you're not.
Absolutely right.
You want to close this out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess it is I was gonna say, you just let us out.
This is even episode.
Yeah. You're right. It is me. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Like I said, we are on the cusp of a rebrand here, so we hope that you'll stick around for that. We appreciate it a lot, and we will catch you on our next episode.